start with that, Scott. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, first of all, the city rode the economy just the same as the rest of the country, and as we saw in our own budgets. About 3 years ago, we had to make some serious cuts, and we did so. We cut millions of dollars out of the budget, and we cut to the point that we didn't have to do it again. And we did that. We were successful in that. We ended up cutting 29 people, 76 positions overall, but 29 people that actually worked. We're told that the city could not afford their salary anymore. We get about 2/3 of our general fund through sales tax revenue. So when you hear it's important to shop in Westminster, and I'll do a plug right now, it is very important. 2/3 of our general fund come from sales tax revenue. The city now is starting to see a rise in that income. The economy has turned around to a point now where we are finally back at a point where we were clear back in 2001. We are finally getting the revenue that we collected back in 2001. It took a lot of years, and it took a lot of tough times that all of us experienced, and the city did too. What the city needs to continue to do now is work with small businesses, and that's another one of my points. That you've got one of my flyers, that I believe that we should support our small businesses and hope that we create a lot of opportunities for those small businesses with our redevelopment efforts. We need to work with them. We've got some grant programs that we have for small businesses, and I would like to see us increase that so that we can offer more for those small businesses, because they really are the backbone of our city, and they create the employment opportunities that a lot of our citizens work at. We also have taken care of a lot of our infrastructure, and it's an argument that I have with my wife all the time on our water fees. She tells me she doesn't want to pay more. I tell her we have to keep our infrastructure, and our kids don't have the problems that if we don't take care of it. I'm out of time.
You're out of time. Catch you.
Scott covered the finances real well. I'd like to re-emphasize, in 2001, we reached a peak for sales tax collection, and in 2011, we finally got back to that same peak. And during that period of time, we had to do a lot of different things. One of the things that I'm proud of from a standpoint of the city and its management is that we have a lot of dollars in reserve to help us go through that. We, in 2009, 2010, we took monies that we had at the end of the year and put them in a reserve fund that we could draw upon when we had a downturn in sales tax. We do that same thing in the water fund, because water use is dependent upon how much rain we get. And on the days that we're not getting rain, you and I are using water to irrigate our lawns and yards. And so the use of water will vary a lot from year to year, and we have a reserve fund that equal that out so we can do the projects that we need to do to maintain that infrastructure. One of the things that we just completed was a complete rebuild of our recycle system near 136th and I-25, and that allows us to recycle a lot of water that we use on our parks and open space areas. And so we're doing a lot of great things to manage our resources.
From a revenue side, as we've all talked about, is sales tax is the biggest portion of the funds that we get coming in. Now, we also apply for grants from federal grants, state grants, and looking at other pieces where we can use one-time funding to do projects with. But a lot of it is also on the fees that we collect. Every time you come in and you pay a water bill, we get that. Every time a builder comes in and takes out a permit, he pays that. Inspection fees. So there's a lot of different ways that we collect money that we goes into operating the city. Well, one of the things that we've never done is mortgage our operating budget. What we have done is we've sold bonds to create infrastructure projects that you can't put aside money for every year, because they're just multi-million-dollar projects. So if you try to save for every project, you'll never get to the point where you can always afford them. So we sell bonds, it's an investment in the city. And then we get those bonds paid back from the fees that we collect off of those, whether it's the water system, road systems, any kind of expansion of what we serve the city with. We've also done a lot of creative work in trying to work with grants, not only from the federal and state level, but here locally. A lot of our open space acquisitions come out of the Adams County and Jefferson County open space. So that funds that we do there is what helps us purchase that land. Plus the citizens gave us an open space tax that doesn't sunset till 2036 is the last term. So it's about another 30 years. But what we committed many years ago to the city was 15% of the city would be open space. What I would tell you is we're there. But that doesn't mean we're going to quit. We'll take that funding that we've been using, and we'll continue to ask for grants to be able to maintain that open space, the trail systems that we've already got for you, so that it's not a bigger burden on us. So we're going from an acquisition mode to a maintenance mode. And in those revenues that we collect, all that goes into insights. Thanks, Mike.
We'll just go back to Scott. These two questions are very similar. This is one that, has been brought up in past elections. I've heard maybe really good explanations and really bad explanations, and it goes to what you were just speaking about. It's been said that Westminster has a large bond debt of somewhere around $300 million. Can you explain how that debt is either beneficial or to the city, or how it negatively impacts the city, if at all?
The financing is a tool that all of us use in our personal life, and the city's no different. We can't afford to go buy a bridge, or we can't afford to do the wastewater system up on Huron just out of our pockets, just the same as most of us can't buy a house with cash, most of us can't buy a car with cash. So we sell bonds for that and pay back over a period of time. It's a good way to use money because you don't have that cash. Our staff over the last 2 years has done an excellent job of refinancing with the lower interest rates and saved the city millions and millions of dollars. And we've ended some of those bonds on earlier time frame because of doing that. And we are closing out some bonds doing that refinancing. They've done a great job to look at the times, and I think in the market at the right time to refinance those bonds and save us money. The debt is not overbearing. The city has excellent bond ratings. I believe it's AA minus, which for a city is excellent that you can have. So you may hear that rumor that we're in debt and that's bad, but the professionals that rate us tell us, no, we're doing a good job. The one thing that is looked upon fondly as our investors and our bond investors in particularly is that we do pay back, and we have a strategic plan that we follow, and we stick to that strategic plan. When we're going to build a bridge, when we're going to do the wastewater plant. So we follow that plan, and we've been on that plan many years, like I told you about with the redevelopment of the mall, what had to take place first before we could do that. So in whole, the city is doing very well. We don't have an overburdening of debt. We're just about where we should be.
I'll have to agree with Scott, and this is part of what we're talking about earlier, is that you can't build these major capital projects out of a savings account. Just like you can't add an addition to your house out of a savings account. So you take out a mortgage, we do the same thing. What we don't mortgage is the operating budget of the city. What we operate off of is just the sales tax and the fees and stuff we collect from them. But from bonding, this is good debt. If any debt's good, this is good debt. And we couldn't collect the bonds, we couldn't get the rating if we didn't get the review by the bonding rating agencies that we go to and meet with every year. And as Scott said, we get high ratings because we manage our debt very successfully. We have never had to mortgage anything that would impact the city's operations in any form or fashion. We do look, just like any other city does, at how can we make the investments that we need, when we need to make them, and still have the ability to pay those bonds off. So through the rating agency, through the staff that work we do, and through the planning that we do, we're able to foretell what we're gonna do with projects several years in advance so that we can plan for these bond sales. But also take the opportunity when the mortgage rates and the interest rates go down to refinance these bonds to defer potential payments. And it's a cost avoidance that we really look at, is if we don't have to pay the interest rate, then we can save the money that we would have had to pay, so that gives us a potential more money to put back into early payment, or looking at infrastructure needs to take out the bonds when it's necessary, and only when it's necessary to take the city and make it an active place to live.
The other thing that needs to be said about the bonds, Scott referred to them, and I wanted to clarify it a little bit. About 80% of the debt, of the $300,000 debt or $300 million debt is in what we call special districts. And each of the development areas that we have has a special district. The bulk of that funding was used to the north, and we had 3 bridges that were paid out of those funds. 128th Avenue, 136th Avenue, and 144th Avenue. That was to allow those retail operations to take place. And all 3 of those bridges were part of those bonding so that we could do that. Now, our agreement was with Thornton. And Thornton was to get on a mile, we did an agreement a mile on each side of I-25. On the east side, all the development until just this last week was on the Westminster side, and Thornton got 1% of the sales tax on the east side. Now that Carbella's is open, we get 1% on their side. So that's the first time that we've had money come back into that. And those are very important projects to the city because they've allowed us. The #1 sales tax generator for the city today is the Orchard. And that was non-existent 4 years ago when it opened. So they're critical investments to allow us to be on top of that projection. The money that is general obligation debt, you all have helped us by voting for that.
10 seconds.
And that includes the money that we use for our open space purchases. So, thank you.
The next one's interesting, especially if you've been in politics for a while. You can start this. It's always difficult because you think you know what you're talking about. And you go out to the public and say, I know what I'm saying, and this is why I say this, and 6 weeks later you find out you didn't know what you thought you knew. Gentlemen, tell me about a time when you had to change your stance on an issue. What was the issue? Why did you change your mind? And how did you explain that change to your constituents? It's a tough one.
Better yet, try to figure out one. Honestly, I can't think of one where that's happened that I can recall, but I would tell you that it's no different than being the head of a household. Look, we have our own individual understandings of things that are happening in the city, and we have our own interpretation. And once in a while, you're going to get one wrong. And I will tell you, if you're out answering questions and you know who you're answered the wrong question to, try to get back to them. But that isn't always feasible. We will always have an opportunity to be human, and you're going to make mistakes. Live up to it. You know, if I make a mistake and I know it, I'll own up to it. That's just part of what I have to do. And it's not any different than in my profession. I have to own up to the mistakes I make and hope it doesn't cost my clients any money. But that's why I carry insurance, so that if it has a problem, that I've interfered with something, my insurance covers it. But Robert, I'm sorry, I can't find a particular one I can think of.
We'll go right.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
You're right.
For me, it was about a year and a half ago, I think it was, Bob, that we had a committee for recycling. And council appointed these folks, and we were looking at how the solid waste code should be changed or shouldn't be changed within the city. And this group started studying different ideas. And At that time, Arvada was talking about going to one trash hauler, and it could only be one time a day. And it was a pay-as-you-go, so the more trash you had out, the more you would pay for each container that you had. And about halfway through that, the rumors started circulating, and it was getting to a critical point. And I think I, at one point, said, I'm not interested in this pay-as-you-go thing, and we should go to the committee right now, and we should say, that's off the table, let's not do that. So staff did that, and they told that group that that was off the table from council. Everybody, I think, agreed with me, or at least the majority did. And then that committee that we had weren't too happy with us, because we told them to go forward and do this study, and then I stepped in and said, nope, we're not interested in that. So we heard back from them. It's like, well, if you're going to do what you want to do, then why do you have us anyway? Very good point. And the direction they were going, after we talked to them a little bit more, was that wasn't going to fly pay-as-you-go anyway. So we met with them. We had a special meeting with them, the whole committee, all council, and we apologized to them. We said, you're absolutely right. We stepped in where we shouldn't have. Me too. I was probably the biggest voice on it. I stepped in where I shouldn't have, and I should have let you continue on with your work. And I think that was probably the biggest faux pas that I've had, and had to go back and apologize and face up to my mistake.
Bob?
I already told you about one when I was named the state pest in the state of Colorado, and I had to go back and get that corrected. And that wasn't easy, because I had to go to all of my friends on my side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle to make that happen. But, you know, one of the great things about life is you make mistakes. And I want you to know that I have, in my lifetime, made a lot of them. And I want you to know that I will continue to make those, because if you're out in front leading, you're going to be wrong once in a while. And I'll tell you this, when I'm wrong, I'll tell you, and we'll work to find out what we can do to make it better and to correct it. Because we don't always know. It's our job to know a little bit about a lot of things, and we may not know the right little bit about those things. And when we find out more information, then we will change our mind. Herb has already told you that we went through 2 developers. We thought we had the right ones both times, but when you go to study a little bit more, you find out you don't have. And so when you don't have what you need, you back up and say, okay, we're going to start over again. And you'll hear us all doing that, because that's part of what leadership is to back up and start over again. Thank you.
I think you all touched on this earlier. In the past, City Council only listens to public comment and rarely responds during meetings. In the future, would you change the culture of the council meetings to answer the citizens' questions while they're there? God, you can start.
The city council meeting, as any public meeting, is a meeting of the officials and not a public meeting. It's a meeting held in the public. We tried that for a little while when I was on the District Accountability Committee for District 50, and really not productive. And quite frankly, we're not doing our job if it gets to that point and there's objections. We should be doing our homework in study sessions, and we should be hearing that input a long time before it comes to council to make that final move. So I would say no, would not do that at a council meeting. It's not productive, because then you get in an arguing match or questions, and it's not really the time to be doing that. So I would not change that, but instead work harder on the front end to make sure that all those concerns and questions and issues that may come up are solved, or at least known why we're moving the way we're moving before it gets to that vote in council.
Just go in a line.
Okay. I can't agree with that. I think that not everyone in the public has the opportunity to see what we're studying through study sessions. They don't hear the conversations that we have. even though there is a 5-minute period on the agenda that says it's open for public comment, we typically have said that that's open for anything that's not on the agenda that will be held as a public hearing. That 5 minutes is a one-sided conversation. Like I said, when I served on council before, we tried to answer some of those questions. Now, some of them are getting into a lot of detail and you just can't answer them that night. So the thing is, take the people's information, tell them that the question they're asking requires more information, more research, but make sure you get back to them. And we try to do that now by just listening to their comment, take down their contact information, and typically staff gets back to them. But a lot of frustration comes from the public that comes in and they want to talk about something. That's their only opportunity to see all the council in a public session and ask questions. It's not for a debate, it's to ask questions. And we don't answer the questions there. It's like I said before, it's the same thing. We used to have the opportunity for someone in the public to take something off the consent agenda. That is no longer there. I'd like to see it back there.
Thank you. I support closer to what Herb is talking about, because I think that we need to give the public an opportunity to be heard and to help them understand why we have done what we've done. What most people don't understand is we have study sessions and there's no item on the agenda that hasn't come before us in a study session. And so we've had the opportunity to hear that, but we don't tell enough about the discussion that has gone on that item. And I think that maybe we need to make that a little bit more flexible to allow us. I don't think that we want to get into a debate, but I do think that we ought to be able to answer questions and move in that direction. So I would support opening up that process and allow for some discussion to take place. As I've been in council meetings, not with the City of Westminster, where the council starts debating issues and first thing you know, they're going down a different road. And I don't think that's good for the city. But I think some discussion would be good, and I'd like to open that up and see if we can move in that direction.
Herb,
Yes?
you're up.
Okay.
Got a couple gotcha questions.
I got you?
No, the question does.
Oh, okay.
Earlier this year, council debated on how we, changing how the mayoral elections are run. There was a lot of debate, a lot of angst, and a lot of people either understood, didn't understand, or were very upset with either way. Can you tell us a little bit about that, kind of how you voted and why you voted the way you did?
The initial discussion had to do with the mayoral runoff race. We've never had one in Westminster. This is the first opportunity that's coming up in 2013 that could even happen. So the discussion was, what's it going to take to run one? The city's never run one. Our election group has never run one. Our city clerk has never run one in Westminster. The initial projections that we were hearing was 150,000, 200,000. We don't know. We can't run it with the county. We can't use their equipment. We can't use their facilities. Is it going to be a mail ballot election? Is it going to be a precinct election? A lot of ifs and ands that were coming up. So 4 members of council voted to bring it up as a discussion item. And it was brought forward, and it came to a public vote, and there was a 4-3 vote. And then we went to the second reading. And then it was a 7-0 vote not to do it. We discussed it, we brought it forward, we put it to the public, and the public commented and gave us information back that they didn't want to make the change, even though they've never been through it. So the final decision was made by the council. We've heard from the public. We're not going to change it.
Good, Bob.
That was a good description of what happened. There's this mayor's campaign. This is for the 30th mayor for the City of Westminster. This is the first time since the citizens decided 20 years ago to directly elect the mayor that we have a vacant mayor's seat. And so the current stipulation in the charter is that if one of the candidates doesn't have 40%, then there will be a runoff. Currently, the projection of that runoff date will be the 14th of January 2014. That's when, if nobody gets to 40%, that's when the second election will take place. And so the proposal was simply that we not have that election and change it like we do to the council. And the majority of people we heard from said they didn't like that idea, and so, as Herb said, the majority of us listened and we all voted against it on the second reading, which is is very unusual for the city council to change on the second reading. But the good news about that is that when the city folks come and say, we'd like for you to listen, we listen and we changed our mind, and we're going to do, if nobody gets to 40%, then we have to have a second runoff. And my campaign is I want 42%, so we don't have to have that runoff, and we'll save ourselves a lot of money.
I was one of the three that was on the opposite side when we first started this. I believe that, as we've talked about tonight, the mayor is different than council. And as the mayor, you should have a broad support. At the time, I didn't know if I'd run. I hadn't decided yet or not. I was leaning that way. So the other thing that came to me was the ethical decision that you don't change the rules when you're going to be part of the race. I don't think you should ever do that, and quite frankly, that's why politicians don't have good reputations at times. We should never, ever change the rules when you're directly affected. I don't care what it is, when. You should not do that. So that's what I stood on, that's what I believed. It took a lot. It was probably the 2-3 weeks that were probably the highest turmoil in the city. We were getting emails, we were getting phone calls, far greater than even prairie dog control, which is another high one up there. But it definitely hit a chord. It was something that was not on our strategic plan, which kind of tells you a little bit about how we operate, and when you deviate from that plan, what happens when it's just something that comes up and is not part of that plan. And I was happy the way it turned out, and I think that the mayor that's elected with 40% of the vote will be a better mayor for this city.
Gentlemen, when I was in the legislature, I was down there fighting on something that I was thoroughly against, but I was fighting for it because, as you guys discussed earlier, we kind of paid for it, and that's fast tracks. Which my wife wanted me to do this in the coffee talk lady's voice, fast tracks, and I can't do it as well as she can. It's neither fast nor is it on track. Kind of discuss, and I'm going to give you only 30 seconds to answer this, what your opinion is and how we're going to really push to get our tracks back up here.
Okay. Fast tracks, I think, is absolutely critical for the Northwest Corridor, Westminster included. They have heard from Mayor McNally, they have heard from us. This is our RTT director. Where's Larry? Raise your hand. Go talk to Larry about this. If you want fast tracks coming through the Northwest Corridor, through the city of Westminster, we need to step up. We need to be heard. It's time for us to give the input here. We have been paying for over a decade for fast tracks. It's no longer fast, it's no longer tracks. They want to take it out completely.
2004, you voted for something that you've been paying for since then. Now, whether or not it ever gets here will depend upon how much money we put into it in the current tax collection process and whether or not RTD will consider coming back for another tax increase. The other thing that's driving it is a study, transportation study going along the US 36 corridor right now. That will have an impact on how RTD will propose going forward. The US 36 coalition has two groups not in favor of continuing the track, and they want to continue to go over with buses because it's more expeditious. Westminster is not among those. We want the tracks.
Nice job.
This last week, RTD celebrated that they were halfway through